Well, are we almost done here? Because I don't want to miss The Simpsons.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. Each week, I chat with artists who use print-based media to do something beyond the expected. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Ronaldo Gil Zambrano. Together, we speak to printmakers around the globe about their practice and passions in the world of printmaking. Hello Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products. In 1915, Ross F. George published the first edition of the Speedball textbook, which quickly became the superlative resource for artists and letterers of all ages and skill levels. This is a great resource for the gig poster gang or for folks who want to develop their fonts, their letter forms for the screen print and relief printed works. In celebration of the 105th year anniversary of the first edition's debut, the 25th edition of the Speedball textbook has a convenient lay-flat construction and 120 pages of examples, contributors' works, and innovative technical insights that is sure to inspire and appeal to scribers and enthusiasts across the spectrum of skill and experience. There's a link in the show notes. My guest this week is Bill Lagattuta, master printer and workshop manager at the Tamarind Institute of Lithography from 1988 to 2015. We talk about his early days as a printer traveling around the country from job to job and rethinking his career path a bit during that time. Landing at Tamarind and working with incredible artists over the years, and being featured in the Albuquerque Museum of Art's amazing exhibition, Printer's Proof, which features editions from some of the great master printers of our time. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to wander the desert a bit with Bill Lagattuta. Hi, Bill. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you, Miranda?
I'm really good. Thanks for joining me for a chat. I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you, and I feel like this is kind of special in that we've actually gotten to meet in person and talk in person first. A lot of my guests I just kind of know by reputation or by interest in their work, but we actually live in the same state, which is fun for the podcast. And I'm excited to talk a bit about you and your story and your time making prints. So thanks.
All right. Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Awesome. Well, before I get into all my questions, would you just let people know a little bit about yourself? I always call it the who you are, where you are, what you do kind of questions.
Okay. Well, I started learning lithography when I was in graduate school. I went to the University of Utah, and I had this great professor, Bob Kleinschmidt, who taught me lithography. And I don't know, I did etching and woodcuts and silk screens and all that, but for some reason lithography, I don't know, there was something about it that, I don't know, it just stuck with me. And so I finished graduate school, to make a long story short, finished graduate school, couldn't find a teaching job, figuring, how else can I stay in the arts if I'm not teaching? So I wound up applying to Tamarind. I was banging nails in Flagstaff at the time. My wife was going to school at NAU in Flagstaff, and I was a carpenter. And so we were pretty close to Albuquerque, so we came over one time. My wife said, well, go over there and make an appointment and go talk to them. So I did, and I was really impressed with what I saw. They were actually, I never forget this, they were proofing a Kenny Price print, and it was like all these blends and stuff, but it was a beautiful print. And I was like, wow, look at all this stuff, you know? So anyway, so I applied, I got in, stayed there, 2 years, I got accepted the second year, and then I got a job after that in Minneapolis. I worked in Minneapolis at Vermilion Editions. After that, I helped set up a print shop for a gentleman in Denver called, his name was Frank Howell. I worked for him for about 3 years. That was a great experience because I set up a shop from scratch, so it was just me as the printer, so I built tables from my height and everything I did.
Make it custom. That's great.
Yeah, it was a custom shop. It was great. And it was a good experience for me, ordering all this stuff and just setting the whole thing up. And then I worked for him for about 3 years, and then I wound up working with Joe Segura. We went to Tamarind together, and he had a shop what at the time was called SETI Impressions, SETI Publishing, and that was in Tempe. And I went down there, worked with Joe for about a year, and then I kind of took a hiatus. I was like, well, do I really want to be a printer the rest of my life? And I was questioning what I really want to do with myself. And so me and my wife, we took a break and we went to Europe and took our bikes and biked around Europe for 3 months just by ourselves.
Oh, wonderful.
And we camped out everywhere pretty much. And we did that. That was great. We came back and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? When I was in Tempe, I was thinking about going to culinary school. I always liked cooking. And I went and talked to this chef one day at some fancy restaurant in Scottsdale. And I walked in. At the time I was running. He looked at me and goes, are you a runner? I said, yeah. He said, well, you become a chef, you're not going to have any time to do that. And I said, well, what's your day like? Tell me what. Well, I get up at 5. I go to the market. I pick out the food, figure out the menu. It was more of like a managerial position, telling people what to do and what to prepare and making up the menu. And he said, I work lunch. Sometimes I get a break between lunch and dinner, and I go home, take a little nap, come back for dinner, stay at the restaurant until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, get up and do it all over again. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to manage people. That's not what I want to do. I want to cook, I want to, chop up stuff. So I thought, no, this isn't what I want to do. So I wound up, when we came back from Europe, I called up some friends, and there was this lady I worked with Joe. Her name was Jill Lerner, and she works at Gemini now. But she worked at Graphic Studio for a while in Florida, and then she got a job at Gemini. She's at Gemini now. Anyway, make a long story short, I called her up one day. Hey, Jill, do you know of any printing jobs? And she said, well, yeah, there's this guy, Mike Hart, in Dallas, Texas. He's looking for a lithographer. I called him up. He said, yeah, come on down and we'll talk. So I went. It was a kind of a full shop. They did, woodcuts, etchings, silkscreen, but they were looking for a lithographer. And it was a great shop. It was right in deep Alum downtown that was just being developed. Just an up-and-coming area of Dallas. And so they were doing some really nice stuff, mainly working with Texas artists, which there's a lot of good ones down there. And so I wound up working there for 3 years. And then one day I was talking with Joe Segura again on the phone, and he said, hey, Bill, they're looking for a shop manager at Tamarind. And I went, I always liked Albuquerque. I was kind of a laid back. I was there in 77 to 79. I said, and I'd been gone for 10 years working at other shops, and I wouldn't mind going back to Albuquerque. It's kind of a nice laid back, like a big town. It wasn't much of a city. And I applied for the job, and I don't know, for some reason I got it. And I wound up being there for 27 years until I retired.
Yeah. So if we could go back just a little bit, I'm always curious for people where they grew up and what role art played in their life and how they kind of ended up getting started in the art world just in general.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you want to go way back to high school, I had this really great art teacher. His name was Mr. Antonelli, and he always had his glasses down over his nose. He was always looking over his glasses. He had this big bushy mustache, and he was always disheveled. His tie, back then teachers wore jackets back then. His tie was all disheveled, and he was just kind of typical kind of an art teacher, I guess, and kind of scattered a little bit. But he was a great guy, and I always remembered him and his wife, they showed Dog. That dog.
Yeah.
Stuff. And one day we were talking, and I said, what are you doing this weekend? He said, there's a big show. I grew up in New Jersey, so somewhere in New York. He said, I can't remember what kind of dogs he had. I think they were small dogs, but I'm not sure what breed they were. And he said, I got to get them ready this weekend. I got to give them a shampoo and a cream rinse. And I went, cream rinse? I said, you can give your dogs cream rinses, And it always stuck in my mind. I was like, wow. Anyway, he was like a really nice guy, and I enjoyed art. We didn't take it too serious. It was just one of the classes we took, but I enjoyed it. It was fun, and then when I went to college, I kind of had this other life too. I played tennis in high school, and I wound up going to college on a partial tennis scholarship. So that was my deal. I went to this strange school in North Carolina called Wingate College. It's just about an hour and a half outside of Charlotte. But from coming to New Jersey, it's like landing on the field. It was just like, oh my God, look at all this open space. I was used to like one town after another. There's no space in between. But North Carolina was just like all this open space, and I was like, God, this is so nice. And but it was also super conservative. It was actually a Baptist school. We had to go to, like, there was mass on campus every Wednesday we had to go to, and we had to keep our hair cut short.
Wow.
But it was, like I said, I was just there to play tennis. I didn't really have any thought about what to major in. I remember when we had to somehow declare, what do you want to major in? And I went, well, what's kind of the easiest course? And they said, well, probably business administration. I said, well, that's my major, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, I'll just be a business administrator. So anyway, I wound up going 2-year school, and we had the coach who, it was his, like, first job, too, I think, coaching. So he wasn't much older than we were. But he was a great guy. In fact, I still keep in contact with his last job. He wound up coaching at Rice in Houston for 7 years. And he was at South Carolina, I think, for a long time. And anyway, he was a great coach, and we all got along, and we had a great team. We had all these international players on the team, and it was like before all that national sports people were. It was like he was like way ahead of his time. This was in '69, and so we did really well. We won a lot of, we always won our division and stuff, and we just did really well. It was a great experience. So it was like so I did the business thing for 2 years, but then I started taking some art classes too. And I thought, wow, this art class is much more fun than business administration, going to accounting classes, economics classes. But actually, in a weird way, I kind of like that too. So, make a long story short, I wound up going to a 4-year school. After that, I got another scholarship when I transferred, and I wound up staying an extra year and getting a double major. I majored in business administration and art. And I had a really great transfer to this school called Appalachian State University. It was in Boone, North Carolina, up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And there was a couple professors there that were really, really good teachers. His name was Bill Dunlap, and then another one, his name was Dean Adelot, who actually really good friends with Jack Lemmon. They wound up, they taught together in Nova Scotia. And at one point in my travels, I was in Chicago where you go looking for jobs, college.
Like a job fair?
Yeah, kind of like a job fair for getting jobs at universities. Anyway, it was in Chicago, and Landfall was in Chicago at the time. It was like 75, I think. And I went by Landfall. They weren't letting any people in the shop because of this conference. They didn't want to have a whole bunch of people in. But they were just about ready to... Jack's wife at the time, her name was Ethel. She was just about ready to close the door on me. And I said, well, I'm good friends with Dean Adelot. He's my teacher. And as soon as she heard his name, she opened the door back up and said, well, come on in. And she was nice and showed me around. Jack wasn't there at the time. It was on a Saturday. And but that's my first connection with Jack. His good friend, Dean Adelot.
Yeah.
But so, like I said, after that, I went to graduate school, and then that's where I learned how to, where I started learning lithography.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. My life in a nutshell.
All right. Interview over. No. No, I'm really taken by in your story. It sounds like there were kind of moments where you weren't entirely sure if printmaking was what you wanted to do. And
Right.
You took this sojourn through Europe on bikes, and you were looking at maybe being a chef. And I think I'm kind of struck by that because it rings very true to me, to kind of sometimes my experience and the experience of other people I know, because it is something of a precarious life, or it can be. I mean, in your list, you were like Dallas, Tempe, Minneapolis, all these places,
Right.
And you move a lot. But I guess it's just kind of nice to hear, because I would reckon that sometimes people think, oh, printer at Tamarind for 25 years, he must have always known this was his thing and just straight short. But it really sounds like it was kind of more of a winding road, and more of kind of going where the opportunities were and just sort of waiting until you could land somewhere, really.
Yeah, and there was, say, pretty much every place I worked, and it's not a bad thing, but it's just the way things are, is that a lot of times I didn't get paid. I'd be like, I can't pay you this week. Money's tight. We're waiting. We're trying to get paid by the publisher, or whatever the situation was, And I mean, I always got paid, but it was always like, I got to wait a week or two or whatever. And it's like, well, what do you got to do? Okay, I understand. It's not your fault. Somebody has to. The cash flow wasn't there. And where I worked in Minneapolis at Vermilion Editions, oh my God, it was the best job to have when I left Tamarind, because they were really doing a lot of interesting work. We were doing multiple stuff with Red Grooms. We did some great etchings with Sam Gilliam. There was just a lot of artists that this guy that I worked for, his name was Steve Anderson, and he had an interesting story. When he was young, he just had gotten out of the Navy, and he was taking the GI Bill going back to school, and he didn't know anything about art. That was the furthest thing from his mind. And one day he signed up for this lithography class, but it was a really topography class. He thought it was a map making class, but it was lithography. And so he walked in. He's like, "What is this? What are these stones? What this isn't what I thought it was." But it just so happened this guy who taught it, his name was Zig Purdy, who printed at ULAE when ULAE first started in the 60s. And he would go to Long Island in the summertime when he wasn't teaching to work with all these great artists, Rauschenberg and Johns and all these people to Tanya Grossman out there in Long Island. And I guess Steve was like a natural at lithography. And so Zig said, "Well, Steve, you want to come with me this summer and help me out?" So there he is printing. He's out in Long Island printing Johns' prints and stuff. And oh my God. I mean, he from there, he was good at what he did, and he wound up working at this other shop called Styria Editions in New York. And they did a lot of silk screens. In fact, they did a lot of the Andy Warhol Chairman Mao prints.
Yeah.
And one time when I was at Vermilion, it was on a weekend, we were there working, and Steve was trying to raise some money. He wasn't the best business person, so he was always trying to raise money, and so he was thinking about selling some of his printers crews. So one day I was in there, and he showed me like Chairman Mao print. He showed me this Jasper Johns print that was just, a knockout that he did at ULAE, and we had some really valuable stuff, blue chip stuff. And he said, "Hey, you want to buy this Jasper Johns?" And I went, "Well, how much you asking?" This is in 1979. He goes, "I'm asking $10,000. Well, I was like, to me, it was like $1 million. $10,000. You got to be kidding. But that print eventually wound up selling for like $100,000.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Yeah. I feel like that's those moments that I feel like people experience where they do have these chances to get these incredible works. Or I even worked for someone once who ran a gallery who had the option of someone trading prints for Microsoft stock in the 90s, and he turned them down. And I feel like we all kind of have like a print that got away story. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got another story about the print that got away, but I'm not talking about it.
Oh no, too painful?
It's pretty hard.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be like the next time we have you on, you can emotionally prepare for it. Yeah. I'm wondering, listening to you, kind of tell the stories about how a lot of the shops, like maybe they couldn't pay you on time or were looking to raise money, but you also had this background, as you said, in business administration as your other major. Did that ever come in handy when you were working with these shops, or were you ever able to kind of help them out a bit?
No, not really. No, it's like, I think when you own a print shop, I think it's more about schmoozing with people that of means and trying to get people to buy subscription sets or whatever to raise money for the print shop, for the company or whatever. Because it's always about never having enough cash. It was just hand to mouth. It was always like, okay, we're okay this month. There was never like a surplus of cash. And to be honest, I really don't know. To me, all that business stuff is just, to me, it's theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I've never really put it to practice.
Yeah.
But like I said, I still enjoyed it. I mean, I still enjoyed the accounting classes for some weird reason. I love doing math, and economy classes. There was this microeconomy class that I took from this Indian professor that, for some reason, it was just fascinating how they make these assumptions out of people's behavior, basically. How people spend money or don't spend money, or I don't know. It's just another world.
Yeah.
Just like everything else is, it's just another world. And sometimes the art world is just, it's probably the weirdest of them all.
I mean, from what I've seen of it, I could agree. But are there any particular anecdotes that are coming to mind that make you say that?
No, just what I've seen over the last 50 years, or not 50 years, but 35 years working and making art for people and seeing how, the whole art world runs, art fairs and that stuff. It's just, it was fun. It was all fun. If it wasn't for my body breaking down, I still do a little printing. I have a little press in my garage, but I certainly don't want to do anything big and monstrous or anything. I just want to basically go back to the basics, do small prints, trying to convince some artists to do some nice drawing on stones, printing some simple prints. That's where I'm at now. And you could say, well, really? No one wants to do that anymore. Well, maybe so. That's okay. It's not like I'm trying to make a living at it anymore. Luckily, working for Tamarind, which is part of the university, I wound up with a pension from the state, which I never really thought about. They take money out of your paycheck and you never see it. So if you never see it, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you don't miss it.
Yeah, you don't miss it. Okay, but then when it came time to retire, I was like, I had to take these couple classes about retirement, and I'm like, really? You gonna give me this money every month for not working? All right, okay, is that how it works?
Yeah.
The more I think about it, it's just like I've just been so lucky. It's like I've just kind of stumbled across things. Things just kind of happen. You talk to printers, it's a small group of people, and you kind of know people, and you meet people, and you talk to somebody on the phone. It's like, oh, there's a job where? Oh, I'll give them a call. And when I was a student at Tamarind, this artist was coming to Tamarind to do some work, and he had passed through Minneapolis, and he was the one that gave me a flyer about Vermilion, and I just kept it. And when I got ready to finish Tamarind, there was I heard of a job opening in Anchorage, Alaska. They wanted somebody up there. They called Tamarind looking to see if anybody wanted that job. And so I was like, well, I'd love to see Alaska. But it was just, we figured out it was so expensive just to move there, to get our stuff up there. Just be like, I can't even afford to move there. So I wound up calling up Vermilion instead, from this guy's flyer that he gave me just out of circumstance. Here's this cool shop I saw in Minneapolis when I was coming through to drive into New Mexico. And stuff like that. Just life happens when you're just, I don't know, stuff just happens.
Yeah, I think there's an incredible significance, and particularly in the art world, although I reckon in other businesses as well, but all the incredible opportunities I've gotten, like going to work in Thailand for a year and all of that, that just came from just kind of showing up on time and being nice to people. And then someone's like, hey, do you want to go work in Bangkok for a year? And I'm like, yes, I do.
Oh, yeah, I'm on that.
Yeah, totally. And it's something I've been thinking about more as I'm kind of entering a middle phase of my art career, I guess, or maybe early middle. I've been in the arts for about 12 years now. Is that the funny way that friendship and professional really intersect in the art world, and people that I consider really good friends also might end up helping fund a podcast I want to start or something. And it's really interesting how that intersection feels so deep, and maybe because there's so much kind of scrappy entrepreneurialness that's necessary in the art world, that people do sort of band together and help each other when we can, and I do it to people when I can help them. Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about your path from being a grad student and then going to Tamarind. So you must have been making your own work in grad school and then sort of shifted and doing the master printer gig. And then did you continue to make your own work, or did your creative outlet kind of just shift to being the collaborator?
Yeah, pretty much did.
Mm-hmm.
I've always done watercolor. Even when I was in graduate school, my emphasis was prints and drawing. So it wasn't just all prints. It was a lot of drawing also. And so I just did drawings, kind of mixed media drawings, and then somehow I know who kind of influenced me was one time William Wiley, who's passed away last year. He came to University of Utah as a visiting artist, and I saw a lot of his watercolors. One day he came into my studio and said, "Hey, I'll show you my sketchbook. Show me yours," kind of thing. And I went, "Well, let me see yours first." And God, his watercolors were just spectacular, and so I think, and I haven't thought about it in years, but I think Wiley kind of influenced me about watercolors. And then one time I think I was in high school. I went over to the Met one Sunday, and I was just wandering around. It was just a rainy Sunday, and I could hop on a bus in New Jersey and be at the Port Authority in like 20 minutes. And so it was the perfect thing to do on a rainy Sunday, just go to New York and go to a museum and just get lost, And there was nothing particular I wanted to see, and I walked by this little room. I'll never forget this. And it was just this little room, maybe only had 20, 25 watercolors in it, but they were John Singer Sargent watercolors.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God, they just floored me. I was just like, oh, my God, these are so beautiful. The way he used the paper and for light and stuff, they were just incredible. He was so facile, so good at watercolors. And so between him and then at one time I saw a Winslow Homer show of watercolors that were just killer also. And I don't know, I just kind of taught myself how to do watercolors. And so I still do them, and so that's how I made the split. There was no reason for me to do, why did I need multiples of something? I wasn't selling anything. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed the collaboration part. I enjoyed figuring out stuff, and I liked working with my hands, and it was all about that rather than, I didn't really have a whole lot to say in printmaking. But anyway, so that's how kind of split my.
Yeah. And how do you sort of think about the relationship between the artist and the printer? Like during your time at Tamarind, there's it's collaborative printing, it's master printing, there's different verbiage around it, obviously. But when you would go into it, what was kind of the attitude or kind of the framework that you considered that relationship to be in terms of the collaboration and producing the edition?
Well, it was kind of two ways like Tamarind worked. I mean, sometimes you would just work, when you were a student, you'd work with the artist kind of one-on-one. We just kind of rotated. Like when I was there was actually 3 senior printers and the shop manager. Mm-hmm. It was Steve Britko at the time. Steve Britko was the shop manager. And so he would just, let's say Roy DeForest came to work. And so we would, let's say Steve would start with him with one print, and then he'd start printing, proofing, and then the next printer would work with him. So it was just kind of rotated around. But when I became the shop manager, I kind of liked it when we kind of worked as a team. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, maybe I'll start with the artist, but kind of let's work together as a team. Like I'll help you out make plates, and you help me out make plates, and we'll kind of work not so much individually, but as a team. I enjoyed that a little bit more. And then when it came time to print the editions, everybody had their, which one do you let's say an artist would do before print. We'd all take turns. Like I remember Tony DeLapp there one time, and there was 2 printers and myself. So he just wound up that Tony did 3 prints, and so we all just took one. But we all worked together on the whole project, problem solved and stuff like that. Well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to? So, I like working that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of students who listen to the podcast and a lot of younger artists who are really interested in collaborative printmaking and maybe starting their own shop or doing some publishing. Mm-hmm. Do you have advice for someone who's maybe just kind of starting out, approaching artists and working together? Your best practices after working with many artists over the years?
Oh, God. One thing I know I'm not good at is because I'm not good at trying to, like, people always ask me, well, why didn't you start your own shop? You knew all these artists after so many years. Why did you maybe stay at Tamarind so long? Or why didn't you start your own shop and stuff? And I'm like, because I know I'm terrible at business. I don't know how to, I don't know how to say no to somebody. And so you got to know your limitation, though. And I think that's really important. You got to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And if you think you're good at smoozing and making deals and raising money and all that stuff, well, fine, go for it. But if you're not, you better hook up with somebody who is, And not too many people kind of do it on their own. I mean, it's a lot of work. I know. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people I know that have print shops, kind of like garage shops, just one person or maybe two people if times are good. They might hire another printer, but it's hard. It's hard to me, it's much easier to make prints than it is to sell them. That's the hard part. I was like, because you make a print and you're like, you're invested in it. You're like, wow, it's a great print or whatever, but then it doesn't sell. And it's like, why didn't this print sell? Or why did this print sell? Which I'm like, I think it's crap. I can't believe it. But anyway, that's the market. Me, I've never been able to figure that out, the market. Selling stuff, it's not my forte, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely coming to understand that a bit myself, interestingly enough. I mean, I've worked in commercial galleries and I'm good with people one-on-one and talking about a work. And I love talking about prints with people and I love educating people about them and having that conversation about what a lithograph is. And we had the Landfall show at the gallery that I work at a while ago, and having that Landfall book and being able to open it up and showing people the prints and showing the artists working. I mean, that was such a fun exhibition to be able to do that. But I'm realizing how much of the art world, as you say, is this schmoozing with billionaires. And I'm just like, I don't think I have that in me. Like, I don't know. And I think it's something that just does have to come to someone naturally. Otherwise, it's just really awkward and strange. And yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that my partner Tim is much more business oriented and so much better at just saying like, why don't you just ask him for some money if you want to do this thing? And I'm like, what? Oh no, I couldn't do that. And it's just a funny world.
I hate talking about it. Even when sometimes I'll sell one of my printer's proofs from time to time for one reason or another, and people inevitably go, well, what would you like for it? And I'm like, I knew you were. It's my phobia, but I just do not like talking about money.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. There's something that goes back to my childhood, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like I'm the same way, where like Tim would just be like $30,000. Like he wouldn't like hesitate. He just would be able to like just do it. And yeah, so I think what you're saying about finding partnerships and knowing your limitations and finding people who can kind of complement that is really good advice. Just kind of got lucky that I didn't know Tim super well when we got married. We got, to quote Johnny Cash, we got married in a fever hotter than a pepper sprout. But I just kind of lucked out that I happened to partner up with someone who could talk money with people, because it is a very in-depth part of the art world that I think I've just kind of been almost like consciously ignoring for my first decade in the business. And now my second decade, I'm like, oh man, this is real. This is, we have to deal with this, don't we? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you, kind of going back to your time in Tamarind, are there any particular memorable moments or additions over your time there? Pieces that you're particularly proud of or that were particularly challenging that you might want to talk about?
Okay. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of artists over the years, and one person that always surprises me is working with Jim Dine. I mean, he's 86 now. He still has tons of energy. He doesn't know what a weekend is. He just he just works and works, and he's got such a love for printmaking. It's just, you know, you can see it. You know, it's no different for him for, you know, painting, drawing, photography, sculpture, whatever he's doing, writing poems. Printmaking it's all on the same level. You know, it's nothing subservient to printmaking, and he just loves doing it, and you can see it in his marks. You know, it's like I've never witnessed somebody who can draw like him. He just has the touch. It's just, and it's funny. He one time I was talking to him about people that, you know, when he first started out, he did these happenings with Klaus Olenberg, and one day I asked him a question about Klaus Olenberg. He goes, "God damn, Klaus," he said, "he's so facile." He said he could just whip out a drawing of a ice cream cone or a screwdriver or whatever he's thinking about as far as an image. And he said I'm just the complete opposite of him. He said I just have to work and scratch and erase, and, you know, I constantly work the paper, and you know, it just takes me forever to get an image to come up. And he said we're two complete opposite people, but, you know, but when I look at them side by side, it's like, oh my God, you know, I mean, they both have such skills, but they come at it from such different angles, you know. And I always remember that story. Well, I got this email. I don't look at my UNM. When you retire, you still get to keep your email account. And I don't look at it that often. And I was looking at it just to see if there was anything there that I should pay attention to about a month ago. And there was an email from this artist that I worked with in '92. Her name is Dottie Addy, and I really enjoyed working with her. We did, I think, a really interesting print. And I would see her from time to time at the print fair in New York. And she would just go to the print fair, and she showed at PPOW, and in fact, she still shows with them. And I got this email from her out of the blue saying, "Happy New Year," kind of thing. And I went, "Wow, Dottie, I haven't heard from her in a long time." So I wrote her back and told her I'm sorry I didn't see this email until she wrote it at Christmas time, and now it's March. And I told her what's going on in my life. I retired and da-da-da, and are you still painting, blah, blah, blah. And she wrote back and had a nice response. And I always remember when we worked together, one time she said, "Well, are we almost done here? Because I don't want to miss The Simpsons." She always watched The Simpsons. I went, "Daddy, really?"
I mean, 1992 was a great year for The Simpsons. Yeah.
So that always stuck in my mind. I was like, I never would have thought that Dottie I loved watching The Simpsons. But she did. And it was a print based on, I hope I get this right, Delacroix. Mm-hmm. And it was that famous, anyway, what she wanted to do, it was kind of like there was this, I think it was Delacroix, he painted this female nude, and some Turkish person bought it, and he would put it behind a curtain because it was a nude, but not everybody, because of the probably Islamic religion and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he kept it under a curtain. Well, she wanted to do this print, and she wanted a softness to the drawing. And so she said, well, could we maybe can we do the skin tone on a piece of frosted vellum, backside of a frosted vellum? Oh. And then we just drape it over this drawing that I did. She was a real good draftsperson. And so she drew this image, and then we just kind of she didn't want it to be flat against it, just kind of hung down. So we made these two tabs that hung over the top of the print and glued onto the back. And then this piece of vellum just kind of floated, just the weight of it, the gravity kind of kept it fairly close to the drawing. And so it was like looking through, like I said, this translucent veil. And it softened up the drawing. It was just I was like, wow, this looks great. Wound up working, thank God. A lot of times things don't work. And I just always treasured that print, and I wanted to show it. I was asking if when Josie came over to pick out prints for the show at the Albuquerque Museum, I showed her that Dottie. I told her this kind of story behind it, how I really, really liked that print. She said it's a great print. She said, but I every other subject matter. I understood that now, so we didn't put it in the show, but it's one of my favorites. And then to hear from her, like 30 years later.
Yeah.
Because I never worked with her again. Like I said, I saw her from time to time in New York, but it's been a long time since. It's been over 20 years since I've actually seen her.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. And I think also it speaks to particularly how in printmaking we're able to work on intense and collaborative projects together, and then people go off into the world, but like that bond really stays. There's something really bonding about working together towards a common work of art that, really keeps people together. So I really like that. I actually am glad that you mentioned Josie, because we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I wanted to make sure to get a chance to talk about Printer's Proof, that museum. I'm sorry, that exhibition in the museum.
Yeah.
And I got to see it opening day, and it is really spectacular. But I'm hoping you could speak to it a little bit and maybe kind of your inclusion in it, and maybe just kind of do a little championing for the exhibition itself. Yeah. It would be great for people to go see it. It's such, I think, a significant exhibition for collaborative printers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great show. I've seen it. I've been there 3 times just to go back, just to look at things more closely with not a lot of people. But every time I go, I either see somebody I know, or Josie's there and she introduces me to some other person. And I see people, I've heard this from other people also, that people are just like reading the labels and like really looking at stuff, which is, to me, it's great. It's fascinating. It's the way it should be. And I just think the variety of work in the show is what really makes it. Like the second time I went back, it was early in the morning. I got there at like 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And there was people there, and as the hours wore on, more and more people showed up. But one thing I noticed, I started looking at Maria Ancona's work, which she had a lot of monotypes in the show, and how she's got a good touch with monotypes. She really, there's some of those monotypes that are just spectacular. They're really, it's like, it's not easy to do a good monotype with an artist. A lot of times it just has a weird, it's hard to do. And she's good at it. She's got the touch, and I was really impressed with it. I'm really looking close at some of those monotypes. But everybody had great work. Everybody. I'm not just saying. One print of Robert Arbor's I remember was where he had 2 blends. I think it was 1 sheet of paper, and it was just a black to white black blend. But there was just like 2 rectangles side by side, and there was about maybe a 3-inch space in between these 2 rectangles. And in the middle of where the blend went, black to white, black, right in the middle where the white was, if you looked right in the middle of the sheet where there was no ink, or it was just white paper, this line turned where the white was, it turned to gray right there in the white paper, and then it continued. It was the oddest illusion. And every time I go to the show, I got to go back and look at that and go, yeah, that's still there. That little illusion is still there. It's probably the best use of a blend I've seen, I think. It's not, there isn't even anything there, but it just continues on.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's some really great prints. I hadn't seen it framed. I've never framed it. It was James Drake print. It's pretty big. It's two 30 by 44 sheets of paper mounted on top of each other. And the top part is a drawing, tone and drawing called Third World Street Girl. It was a Mexican mother with her baby and stuff, and it's just a great drawing that James did. Well, he's such a good drawer. It was when toner was kind of a fun thing to draw with, plates, and it was fun to draw with. You could pull some proofs and they looked great, but then additionally not easy with toner. Kind of jump all over the place. The darks would get a little darker and the lights would disappear, and you'd be like, oh no, what's happening here? But it wasn't easy to edition, but it was nice to see that up on the wall. I haven't looked at that print in probably 20 years. So some of the early work I like. Steve Britko had some great prints in the show. Everybody has prints in the show. Yeah. It's just a great variety of stuff.
It is, and I think one of the things that is so significant about it, or at least for me, was, of course, that it's this exhibition of prints, and it's organized by printer. And I feel like that's so wonderful, considering that I'm sure you do this too, when you go to museums often and you see a print on the wall and you're like, this is wonderful. And you're looking for the credit of the printer or the shop, and it's not included and the chop is framed over, and you're just like, it's like they just were erased from history. And so this is such a counterpoint to that, to have an exhibition organized around the printers. And here is a body of work in one place from this printer, and then here's a body of work from that printer. And I think in terms of just educating people on the system of collaborative printmaking, I'm sure it's just doing a fantastic job. So that's super fun. I'm hoping to get Josie Lopez on the podcast at some point just to talk about it in general, because I think she'd be wonderful to do it. And it's, I think, one of the best printmaking exhibitions I've ever seen. Yeah.
Well,
cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just one more person I'd like to mention.
Yeah, of course.
As far as artists, is when I worked at Peregrine Press in Dallas, Texas, I worked with this artist, and he has one print in the show. His name's Otis Dozier, and he was in his 80s when I worked with him. And the one print that's in the show, it's a picture of these crows eating watermelon in a watermelon patch, these 3 crows. Well, there's what do you call those little cue? You can just put your camera on it and it clicks.
Oh, like a tripod? Or a...
No. It was on the wall.
A QR code. Right, yeah.
QR code, yeah. And so there's one on right next to Otis's print there on the wall. So if you use your phone, it goes to another print that he did that it's at the Whitney Museum that he did in 1939 with Lawrence Barrett, who was a printmaker in Colorado Springs, pretty well-known printmaker. And it's such a nice, because it's the same subject matter. It's crows. The Whitney one, the black and white, it's just black and white. It's just one color. And but it's nice to see that from 1939 to 1984, Otis goes back to doing his crows again in a different way, color and stuff. But he was one of my favorite artists to work with. He always wore red suspenders. He had a big old head of white hair, and he kind of like portrayed himself as a country person, but he was a very sophisticated artist. He traveled around the world and stuff, but he had just great stories. One time I was doing a print with him, a jackrabbit, and he wanted to put some color in it, and I said, well, for the earth, kind of a desert thing. And I said, some kind of brown? And he goes, no. And like real emphatic. I went, well, why is he saying no so quick to my question? I said, Otis, what is it? You don't like brown? He said, I hate brown. I said, what? You hate brown? He said, you really want to know? I said, yeah. I said, well, when I was a little boy, he said, we go to church every Sunday, and my mom bought me this suit, this brown suit. He said, that damn suit never wore out. He said, I hate brown.
I love it.
It still cracks me up now. No, we're not using any browns. I never use brown in anything. So we wound up using some kind of orangey, rusty color, sanguine.
Totally. That's really funny.
But yeah, everybody needs to see that show. It's open until mid-May, I think, is when it comes down, May 15th.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to, like I said, get Josie on before that so we can start spreading the news, because it's definitely a show worth traveling for. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for talking with me. It's been really fun, and thank you for sharing your stories. And I look forward to seeing you more out in the world of art in New Mexico, and I hope we can stay in touch.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Great. Well, thanks so much, Bill. I will let you know when the podcast is coming out, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
You too. Bye.
If you liked today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help us keep the lights on and get bonus content, like Shop Talk Shorts, where our editor Timothy Pauschak digs deep on materials, processes, and techniques with our guests. Also, if you've listened this far, you might be that special kind of print friend who would leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world to us if you did, and it really does make an impact in the world of podcasting. And that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Kari Christensen, a Vancouver-based printmaker who is known for her bold, iconic lino cuts of sweeping mountains and contemporary Canadian landscapes. We talk about growing up in a small town, how her background in classical studies influences her artistic practice, and why being gay makes her a better printmaker. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, is written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.